Okay, I'm not going to rush with this. We know I'm not very good at doing these kind of videos in terms of what I'm going to attempt to do here. But today is March 4th of 2024. And we're going to talk about the housing crises in the United States of America, in addition to Canada. And being that I live in British Columbia, Canada, my main focus will be British Columbia, okay? In correlation to the housing crises in general, continental-wide, all right? In terms of the United States and Canada. So we're going to start with, first, I did a quick Google in terms of number of immigrants coming to BC. Right? Anyway, we'll get to those numbers in a minute. Now, I take this, first of all, with a grain of salt, because for as much as our politicians don't like to acknowledge it, we do have an underground of illegal immigrants coming into Canada who adopt fake IDs. Okay? So this is just a rounded off number on a legitimate sense. Just like we have legal organ harvesting in Canada, we also have illegal organ harvesting in Canada, to which those numbers are not being registered. Well, it's the same thing with migrants, immigrants, whatever you want to call them. All right. So 500,000 new. This was posted on February 1st of 2024 by somebody, and I'll read it. Currently, annual immigration in Canada amounts to almost 500,000 new immigrants, one of the highest rates per population of any country in the world. So what is that saying? Is that saying that, is that saying that Canada is the leader of the pack when it comes to having immigrants come to the country as a whole in terms of the 500,000 per year that's documented? Okay? As of 2023, there were more than 8 million immigrants with permanent residence living in Canada, roughly 20% of the total Canadian population. More than 8 million immigrants with permanent residence. Okay. All right. Then we're going to go up here. Number of immigrants in British Columbia, 2022 stats. But here it is, what is the net immigration, what is the net migration to BC? Now, I think the migration is between provinces. Net number of interprovincial migrants in British Columbia from 2000 to 2022. So from 21 to 22, I guess, I don't quite understand this, but I guess there's about, we'll just round it off at 16,000 migrants that go back and forth between the provinces. But that's not what we're looking for, at least not at this point. Okay? Number of recent immigrants, this is recent, immigrants to British Columbia from 2000 to 2022. Right? 2021 to 2022, we received approximately, in a legitimate, legal, documented sense, 83,200. But I'm sure that number is higher. Okay? To which the government doesn't factor in. And then in 2021, we have 34,388. All right. And then 18 to 19, 43,000. These are numbers coming in. So these are new people coming in. Okay? Show more. No, it doesn't show more. More rows. What is this? Accept all cookies. Alright, so what's this? 2009. 40,000. We're at 2022. It jumped up to 80,000 and more. So it was a pretty consistent, documented, right? It's been going on since 2001. I think in 2016 they brought in 10,000 at one time in one pop. 10,000 at one time in one pop of Syrians from Syria into Surrey, British Columbia, Canada, where I live. Okay? That's what they did in 2015, 2016. I'm pretty sure it was 2016. All of a sudden, 10,000 Syrians were placed into the municipality of Surrey, British Columbia, Canada, and took up whatever housing was available at that time in 2016 to accommodate 10,000 immigrants coming in at one pop. I remember that, people, because they all ended up at the food bank, and then you had a whole bunch of aggressive men standing in line at the food bank expecting to go first before everybody else. Yeah, because I was at the food bank, and that I was there when that shit happened. And they were getting all huffy and puffy because they weren't being serviced fast enough. Yeah, and so approximately 40,000. So out of that 40,000 immigrants coming to British Columbia, Canada, 10,000 of them were placed in the city of Surrey, where I live. Okay? So there was a big chunk of the housing market in terms of rentals removed based on that political decision. And then so on. We had a drop in 2021, and that's probably only because of what was going on with the lockdowns, all right, in terms of less travel in between countries and so on and so on and so on. But if you notice, look how it jumped up. Okay? Now it's been projected that they want to bring in the federal government under their framework, their accord that I've mentioned before, in partnership with foreign entities that want to rule the world. You know, they're shooting for 1 million immigrants to come into Canada every year to so-called stimulate the economy and make sure that there's a working class in order to be able to pay their taxes into government coffers so that those pension plans, superannuation, life insurance policies, their benefits, you know, their wages, and when it comes to the public union sector, is always paid for. Plus, we've got the quote-unquote workers to look after the baby boomers that are coming in over the next 15 years. So that's how they're justifying it, right? In terms of, we need the working immigrant in the country of Canada in order to sustain our budgets, as well as have the working class for to look after the elderly, to farm to pick the tomatoes in the greenhouses, to work in dentist offices, or whatever. All right. So we can clearly see that something suspicious all of a sudden just went boom. And you can probably tack on, honestly, people, I don't believe that number. Okay? I'm sure we have a whole lot of shenanigans going around it in terms of... Now, when they say immigrants, is this like somebody that's trying to move into the country and then starts the process? Or are they the working visas, you know, or people just visiting? Like, you know, you need to, like, there's more to this number than meets the eye. Okay? All right. And then, so we basically got an idea. And also, too, a large amount of these people, you know, they go, first they come in from the east, normally, and then they migrate themselves to British Columbia, Canada, through networks, whatever those networks are like for example, in 2016, you know, we had 40,000 immigrants come to Canada on the East Coast, and then 10,000 of them were automatically shipped to Surrey, British Columbia, Canada, where I live, which is on the West Coast, right, to take up the housing that was in my area. So, you know, like, and that's what they're doing, people. Okay, that's what they've been doing. All right, so let's just carry on. I almost want to try and see if I can set up a wipeout board, but I kind of want to do it on paper. So I have to hunt around for some paper and set up the board so that, you know, as I crunch these numbers over a period of time, I can add on to the board, right? No, we're not listening to this. Okay, so what we're going to do here, there's two videos that I want to discuss as I go through them. But I got things I have to do, so I have to do it in bits and batches. Now, this is done by a Cash Jordan. He seems to be verified. I don't know who this individual is, but he's got 7,900K subscribers. And he's talking about America is forcing out its middle class forever. Okay? All right, so I haven't watched the video. We're going to go and watch it at some point. It's only 15 minutes long. And, you know, I'm going to play and talk, right? In correlation with this video, which I'm going to read my comment because I don't trust YouTube, right? If you sound too intelligent, but they don't like you, they will shadow ban you, delete your video or your comments or whatever. Right? So before I exit out of this video, I thought I'd read my comment in regards to this video, because then it's documented, right? In terms of I actually wrote it, it was me. But it might sound too spot on for the people that are running the shenanigans to leave it up there. Now, it may stay up there. It's hard to say. But in the meantime, we've got this video, which is called Middle Class Only Rentals, to which actually relates to the BC budget, to which I just did 2 videos on. Okay? I did 2 videos on that brought up the subject of this very subject that this person is now talking about. And this person is what is he called? So he must be a Canadian, because it says the Canadian. The Canadian Shield. Okay? And he's got 9,087K subscribers. All right? And so far, this got 72,000 views in 10 days from the time that he uploaded it. Okay? And he's talking about Prime Minister Trudeau admitting to his middle-class rental scheme, to which the British Columbia Canadian government just brought up through their budget. Only they didn't completely label it as a rental subsidy for the middle class, which in essence, that's what it is. It's a rental subsidy for the middle class. But the BC Liberal government, the New Democrat Party of British Columbia, Canada, extended it and is going to try and add in the opportunity for these middle-class income subsidized renters to purchase what they're living in, right? I don't think, I watched most of the video. I didn't hear him mention that part. He more just talked about the government is just trying, like the federal government in partnership with provincial governments, is just trying to build in a subsidized rental program for the middle class to move into 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom quote unquote apartments that will remain as subsidized rentals. I'm telling you, people, we're going down a slippery slope. Okay, and this is why I feel like I have to use myself as an example when it comes to that manufactured poverty, to the point where you become a sitting duck, okay? Where when I leave this house, I am facing homelessness. Now, based on my experiences, I've lived in Canada my whole life, namely on the West Coast between Victoria and Vancouver. I've lived in Alberta, but that's as far as I've gone. But I've been here for 62 years, and I've seen a lot, and I've been through a lot, okay, in regards to the housing market when it comes to rentals. And after all this time, basically, when I leave this house, if I don't want to say can't get subsidized housing in any kind of capacity, I am facing basically homelessness, because I just won't be able to afford anything, with or without my grandkids. It won't matter, because of the manufactured poverty that our governments conspire against the people. Well, they've taken it up to the next level, and now what's happened, basically, I know this video is going to get long, right? I may have to do it in 2 parts, but we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it, right? What's happened is they've been tearing down bungalows from the 50s, 60s, 70s, okay? Hundreds of thousands of trees right across the province as they tear down house after house after house after house, block after block after block, district after district after district. These quote-unquote property developers, who namely come from India, China, the United Emirates, so you're looking at the Punjabis, Sikhs, Hindus, the Chinese, to whatever religion that they have, as well as the Muslims that come from the United Emirates, those kind of places. Those 3 groups have immigrated so much into Canada to where they've got their tentacles, their fingers, into every corner of the province, which becomes that organized religion, regardless of the religion, because there's multiple ones, that are partnering up with our governments to tear down house after house after house, block after block after block, district after district after district, as they destroy the wildlife and tear down, cut down, chop down hundreds of thousands of trees in the province of British Columbia, Canada, to accommodate monster homes under the title of multi-family dwellings. So you build a multi-family dwelling, which is the equivalent of a monster home, and some of these places can get real big, and you fill them up with a bunch of Punjabis, label them as a family, and c'est la vie. And then it's house, monster house after, monster house after, monster house after, monster house after, monster house, which becomes its own gated community. So now you've got Little India over here with monster house after monster house after monster house. Now, mind you, they take some of these houses and they break them up into suites, so the overlords are living up at the top, while the maids and the servants and the renters are living on the bottom. Or it could be a multifamily unit home where you've got 15 Punjabis, 12 Punjabis living in a monster house. Okay? And then it becomes Little India with its gated community. And then when we go over here, now we're in Chinatown. Little Chinatown. Only it's not so little anymore. And it's the same thing. Monster house after monster house after monster house. Alright? And then you go over here. And now you're finding a pocket of Muslims that, like, you know, birds of a feather flock together, right? Kind of thing. Birds of a feather flock together kind of thing. Birds of a feather flock together as a kind of thing. But as they're doing that, they're tearing down all the houses to build their monster houses. So anybody that was living in this neighborhood, and this neighborhood have been pushed out, basically. But you see, they're not satisfied with that. Hell no. They need a second income. So now that they've got all this wealth, because they own all these monster homes, because you're talking a whole district, block after block after block, after they tore down house after house after house, and basically flushed out everybody else in those houses. They don't care where they go as long as they're gone, right? Then what happens is they come into neighborhoods like mine, right? And then they partner up with the city through the property developers, to which in British Columbia, Canada, a lot of these property developers don't have company names. What they have for a corporation name is a whole bunch of freaking numbers. And then along comes the UN soldiers, the immigrant men that were brought into the country, and then they stack and pack them into old bungalows, 12, 15 at a time, and put them to work to start tearing down even more houses as they evict either the tenants that lived in those houses, or they target the owners of those houses, and if they're elderly, they're going to get medically kidnapped, many of them within the healthcare system, and they won't be allowed to go back home. They will be forced to sell their asset, aka their house, and then forced to go into long-term care for that long-term care, to which a lot of it now has been privatized and owned by Chinese corporations. Because what it does is it makes the house become available to be on the market for the overlords that are living in the monster houses to scoop them up cheap, if you want to consider $3 million cheap. But for the overlords that's looking to tear down 7 houses in a row and then build in these fucking stack and packs with the plastic pipes, people, with the clamps on the plastic. These are just little metal, steel, clamps, those little clamps. That's how they put their pipes together. They take these clamps and they clamp it on from pipe to pipe to pipe as they're building their buildings subpar to generate income out of an overinflated price, only because these buildings are quote-unquote new, to supplement their incomes as they live in their monster houses and plot and scheme how they're going to get to the next location and buy up the next 5, 7 houses, tear them all down, kick everybody out, medically kidnap them, lock them up. Some people get murdered in their houses, And of course, we don't have a proper justice system out here. So oftentimes those murders get covered up, whether it's murder by fentanyl or anything else that goes on around here in British Columbia, Canada. All I know is they want the problem gone. So as people are living in their houses being renters, little do they know they're being targeted by the overlords in the community that want to fucking profiteer off of body parts so that they can run that money through the housing market. It's like a vicious cycle, people, I'm telling you, and this is why I need to write the fucking shit down. All right. Now we got two different kind of immigration crises going on here in two different countries. We've got the legal one through the federal government up on the east coast of Canada that's in partnership with some foreign entity as the example of how to do things in a legitimate way. The United States never signed up with that program, but they didn't care. All they did was start giving a whole bunch of poor people in a whole bunch of poor countries or whatever a whole bunch of money and made it easy for them to travel to the border of the United States of America and then just simply cross over. So now what's happening is the United States of America, as we know, is facing a similar, if not the same kind of housing crises. And because, you know, they're trying to be humanitarian, basically they're forwarding the money that they have to spend on the federal budget in addition to state and municipal, district, county budgets to accommodate all these quote-unquote illegal immigrants. In the United States, they're dealing with illegal immigrants that get all the services. They get the federal subsidy, they get the state subsidy, and they get the county, municipal, cities subsidies, whether it's being funneled through nonprofits, just like it's happening out here. How do you think that in 2016 that the city of Surrey was able to house 10,000 Syrians coming in within 1 month when we were already facing a housing crunch? They had to free up 10,000 houses. We'll cap it at 8,000. They had, because of children or whatever, right? They had to find 8,000, we'll just say, we'll round it off at 8,000, independent suites, whether it was apartments or houses, or maybe townhouses. Only 3 choices, or basement suites. They had to free up 8,000 accommodations in order to house 10,000 Syrian immigrants in 2016 because the province of British Columbia said so. So who jumped on board with that one? Well, obviously the city of Surrey. And they did it. And they created even a larger housing crisis by forcing out more people out of their basement suites, more people out of their houses, more people out of their apartments, and then all of a sudden, you know, everybody was living in their tents, couch surfing, children were being removed from their families because families couldn't afford proper housing because our government was too busy housing the Syrians. And that's just the Syrians. Of course, we know more came besides just the Syrians, okay? But that number was the big ticket item in one pop. All right. So how do you get rid of people out of their houses to accommodate those numbers? You medically kidnapped them. The elderly. Sorry, you broke your ankle. It's never going to heal. You can't go back home because you can't walk around in your kitchen. You might fall down and break your hip. We don't want you to break your hip, so we're just going to lock you up in an old folks' home, make you sell your house, and then you can pay for the services that we provide to you. That's what Uncle John taught us, people. Either or, they're stealing the old people's assets. Okay? In many, not all, because it would be too conspicuous if it happened to each and every old person, but many. It happened to many elderly people, and it's still happening. As the government brings in the grunt workers from the Philippines and, Cambodia and places like that to do their dirty work for them, right? And those immigrants, they're not going to, be whistleblowers to tell what's really going on, because they're not going to want to be sent back to their countries for exposing what the government was really doing, as in the case of Uncle John. They just went along with it, hoping that they would be able to afford a house one day, being that they were the right quote-unquote ethnicity, because they're the preferred citizen now, okay? In terms of what makes a Canadian. Not the ones that were born in Canada, but what comes into Canada and what they're willing to do in order to gain wealth for themselves and their collective ethnic religious group. All right. Don't get distracted. Don't get mad. Okay. I lost my little bit of train of thought there. Okay, so what's happening in the United States, though, is a little different, right? You got all these modge-podge of immigrants crossing the border illegally, being protected by the federal government. So it doesn't matter whether it's illegally or not, legal or illegal. It doesn't matter, because our federal governments are protecting it. Not only are they protecting it, but they're also funneling money into it. They're paying off nonprofits to relocate these individuals throughout the country. Both countries are doing it at the hands of the federal government. Of course, states are benefiting from it because, then it becomes transfer payments to, for them to divvy out to the counties and the municipalities, and so that the municipalities can get involved to kick out families like mine, and then have one of their workers that work at the city hall to scout out the housing, so that when the Syrian or the Afghanistan or whoever, or the Punjabis or whoever, it doesn't matter who it is, right? Chinese, they have housing. Because families like mine, if we don't leave, as we got that whip on our back, well, we just start dying. And the ones that are instigating this, they hope that you will leave and get fed up with it. That's why they make it so uncomfortable for you. That's why they keep raising the rent for you, so that you'll get fed up and leave. But the only thing is, they've come to their max now, right? What's in the dark comes out into the light, people, and it's coming out into the light where there is no place to leave to, right? Because the corruption has been going on for so long. So, of course, the government's got to come in with a new scheme. A new scheme. Because they've just... Okay, so now that I've said all that, it comes to the default of, for whatever our governments have been doing, whether Canadian or the United States, it's come to a head where they have flushed out so many people from their housing, whether homeowners, renters, right? Or even people wanting to buy houses that were born in this country but just don't have the deposit for a $3 million bungalow that's slated to be tore down anyway for multi-stack and pack, plastic-filled freaking suites at $3,500 a pop for a one-bedroom, and then consider that to be quality living with or without a playground on the freaking roof? Yeah, okay. So they have to before the homeless crisis really gets out of control and really becomes noticeable. It's one thing when you've got the little Sierras out on the streets that were kicked out of their houses and turned into junkies. It's another thing when you've got people like me, right, getting old, going blind, right, have dependent grandkids that are orphans and being kicked out of our houses with no place to go, because that's easy enough to solve. All they have to do is come in and scoop up on the grandkids and say, get the fuck out, Judy. Just get the fuck out. I'll be like Sierra. The only difference between me and Sierra is I won't be a junkie. Because they can't pull the wool over my eyes, people. They can't get me addicted to their drugs at age 62 years old to cover up their dirt. Right? But they will throw my ass out of the hospital when they're done with their fuckery, excuse me. But basically, like they did with Sierra, time after time after time, before they would give me housing. Yeah, all right. Well, a lot of people are facing that problem. And the government knows it. Down the road where my friend lives, with all the trees falling in her yard because of root rot, because of the building that they built right across from her with the leaky basement that's been flooding for the last 3 years since that thing's been built, that practically still sits empty because it was made for 55 and over, but ain't nobody buying because, or even renting it, because one is either too expensive to rent for a one-bedroom dicky little fucking unit, or two, the ones that could afford to buy it, probably a lot of them are ending up in old folks' homes because of being medically kidnapped. So what happens is that building, in essence, becomes just something to launder money around. In terms of, it's like China, building cities with nobody living in them, people. You don't think that's not happening out here? Of course it's happening out here. But it was almost like they purposely went out of their way to make it so that the building leaks in the basement, so it floods out the surrounding neighborhood, so that, they can justify tearing up another 20 more houses to build another 7 more buildings like the one that they got, whether people live in it or not. But who the hell can afford $3,500 a month? And then not be able to park your car in the carport in the basement because it's flooding out every time the rain comes. But that flooding serves a purpose because it floods out my neighbor's yard to where all the mature, full-grown trees are just falling over because of root rot. Well, anyway, she's just a number on that block where another 7 houses, the person that owns her house owns another 5, I'm not sure if it's 5 or 7 houses connected to her house, to which you've got people living in those other houses that are, I guess you could say, middle class, but have been living there for years, renting, work as university professors or whatever, are happy to live in the house, have been there for years, but are all facing homelessness, not to mention the ones living in the basement in between. It's a mixture of incomes. That's what I'm trying to say. Either or. The 7, we'll just say 7 properties, because that wouldn't be unusual to wake up one morning and find 7 freaking houses all torn down in one fucking day. Okay? You break up those houses, 2 suites per house, that's 14 suites. And if you take off another 3 or 4 more suites, right? That's 10, because, maybe it's someone like my house, where we're one family living in this house. It's still 2 separate suites. But in terms of rent, you're looking at 10 out of 14 suites being evicted because of one owner that decided that he's going to build a stack and pack building with plastic pipes that are stuck together with, little steel rings, clips, right? They're clamps throughout the whole building with subpar wood, because they don't make them like they used to, people. Let's be realistic about it. All right? They may or may not have cracked foundations where they're leaking after they've been built. It's hard to say, right? Because ain't nobody checking. Obviously, the city doesn't give a shit. All it cares about is the income that generates so that they can get their share of the tax dollars that come in from that process, while the rest of that money goes into the provincial budget so that they may or may not have a surplus. Because that's the only thing outside of illegal organ harvesting and illegal activity that props up the middle fucking class here when it comes to sustainable budgets, sustainable living. All right. Anyway, my neighbor is facing homelessness when the time comes to have the rug pulled out from underneath her feet, even though she's been living in that house for 20 years. Her neighbor across from her, same problem. Been living in their house for umpteen years, works as a professor or something in the university, does something, has, considered middle class, can afford, he's got, right? They're facing the same thing, so on and so on and so on and so on. So with those numbers jumping up, where those kind of people, not my family, we're the throwaway. Right? Who cares if Shimei got murdered? It doesn't matter. It got rid of part of the problem. Get the house cleared out so that we can maximize our dollar amount on rent, as well as maximize our dollar amount on illegal activity in terms of illegal organ harvesting and trafficking of body parts. So that the overlords that facilitate this shit in partnership with corrupt government workers can gain more wealth for themselves. Right? Well, what it's done is it's throwing out the university professor that's been living in his house for 15 years or whatever as a renter, but is comfortable to be there, right? Or like my neighbor who's been in her house for over 20 years. She's got money to put on a little down payment for something, so when the time comes, she can make that transition. The only problem is she can't get an approval for whatever reason, because there's always somebody in front of her that gets it first, or the dog becomes the problem. Sorry, we don't want the dog. Get rid of the dog and we'll consider it. But get rid of the dog first before we consider it. And just because we consider it doesn't mean we're going to give it to you, because there's another 15 applications before you. And then don't forget, once you do move in as a co-op, in other words, you pay to belong in this little whatever, then you've got strata fees. You've got this rule, that rule, and right? So really, how much independence do you really have? Okay. The point is she's facing homelessness. And she's been looking for a few freaking years. So what I'm saying is this new scheme that the federal government, in partnership with the leader of the pack, British Columbia, Canada, the first one to spill the beans with this subsidizing the middle class, to which my neighbors over there that are facing homelessness would be considered to be basically middle class. Not all of them, but some of them will go 50-50, right? Before the government allows the middle class in Canada to be thrown out in the streets, so it's really blaring in their faces as to what kind of dickheads they really are. They're going to scramble around and figure out a scheme where they can house them, subsidize them if they have to, okay, to cover their tracks, people, as they continue to target families like mine, whether we live in the basement suite or whether we happen to have the whole house because we came in 2009, when we first started renting the house, right? But of course, we're a different class of people, so who cares if Sierra gets lured to her death? It doesn't matter. The problem is gone. They made their money. Who cares if Shimei got murdered in the house? Doesn't matter. The problem is gone. They made their money. Who cares if Andre was illegally apprehended? It doesn't matter. The problem was gone, at least for a while, right? Who cares if I fell through the cracks with the healthcare system because of shady politics, to the point where I'm becoming blind, to the point where, I'm in jeopardy of losing my grandkids. Not to mention, even if I didn't, where am I going to move to when my landlords come to me and say, that's it, you need to get the hell out. It doesn't matter. No more excuses. And they'll make sure I fucking leave. And then what? Then what, people? Is the province of British Columbia, Canada, going to house me as a middle-class person? Yeah. No. No. They're going to treat me like they treated Sierra. They're going to let me run the fucking streets hoping I'll get drug addicted and feel sorry for myself, and then just die. As they're waiting in the background to capitalize off my freaking body. Okay, that's the way it works. So, with that said, let's stay focused. I'm going to take a break. Okay, so before I start with those other ones, and before I start with what I got to do around here in the house, I just came across this. Now, this is a YouTuber that calls themselves R50 States. Makes me think of my website, but besides that point, here we go. Top 8 homeless states in America are passing anti-homeless laws. All right? And this was done 5 months ago. Where am I? There you go. 5 months ago. Maybe we should read quickly what they wrote. Oh, that's a lot of reading. But, well, let's do that anyway. Like I said, if I have to run it in part 1, part 2, part 3, I'll do that, people. Okay, so this person wrote on September 13th of 2023. Now, maybe things have changed. I don't know. So I'm going to read this, and then we're going to listen to the video. I'll make a comment, and then I'm going to shut off, and then we'll come back. Okay, so top homeless states in America. The United States is facing a growing homeless crisis. All right? With the number of people experiencing homelessness increasing by nearly 20% in the past decade. Now, that's just Americans, okay? That has nothing to do with the influx of immigrants, because currently, over the last year and a bit, immigrants in general were pampered. They got the federal, the state, and the municipal subsidies in combination with services from local nonprofit groups within whatever state you were talking about, right? And they basically had all their housing needs met, their medical needs met, their sundries in terms of, you know, toothpaste and toothbrush and sanitary napkin, whatever, their food, right? And then the networking into permanent housing. All right. While the homeless people were left to languish out on the streets, or, as in California's situation, just up and disappeared in the thousands all of a sudden within less than a 12-hour period, because it happened in the middle of the night, to which there's never been no real follow-up as to how the city, that is, managed to house that number of people after those people living out in that area on the streets basically for years. And it was no immigrant population out on the streets at that point. It was Americans, okay? All right. 8 of the most homeless states in America are now passing anti-homeless laws. This is where I need the wipeout board and a little bit of research. Which critics say criminalize homelessness and make it harder for people to get back on their feet. Right, like my neighbors down the road that are facing basically homelessness to one degree or another, even though some of them are in their 70s and have money to purchase something where they can maybe make that transition, or others just can't afford overinflated rents. Never mind trying to buy something, people, even though they're working at a middle-class income. All right. These laws vary from state to state, but they often target homeless people's belongings. But that's nothing new. That's been going on for decades. That goes on out here too. Their ability to sleep in public and their access to public spaces. For example, some states have banned people from sleeping in their cars. Okay? While others have made it illegal to sit or lie down on sidewalks. Okay? We're not talking immigrants here. We're talking American people, okay? These laws can make it difficult for homeless people to find a place to rest their heads. And they can also make it harder for them to access essential services like food and health care. Again, we're not talking about immigrants here of any kind, right? Because their needs are being met through this global agenda to replace the original with something else, okay? The passage of anti-homeless laws is a trend that is deeply concerning. These laws do nothing to address the root cause of homelessness, and they only serve to make the lives of homeless people even more difficult. We need to find better ways to help people who are experiencing homelessness, not criminalize them. All right, so let's just listen to this. How long is it? 11 minutes. Not very long.
Numerous anti-homeless laws are being passed across the U.S. In Missouri, a new state law that took effect on January makes it a crime for any person to sleep on state property. For unhoused people, sleeping in public parks or...
Okay, so the first thing that I'm thinking of here now, this was addressed to deal with the homeless crisis within the American people, regardless of how it all manifested itself out. Okay? This was not addressed, passed, created for the migrants, the immigrants, right? The illegal aliens, whatever you want to call them. Okay? Refugees, whatever. Because anytime anyone's crossing over the border illegally, and quite possibly legally, because we never hear about that now, do we? But we'll just say illegally, all their needs are met, 150%. Thus far. However, it's kind of gotten out of control now, where they have too many and not enough money and not enough resources to sustain whatever it was that they did in order to get them to come, to create the crises even more. So now they're starting to push them out onto the streets. So my first question is, these laws, now this is, okay, these laws, does it apply to immigrants as well, not receiving housing from the state and the district counties because there's just no more money, no more available space? Or is this still just specific to the American-born people? Okay? He's not being clear about this. Because now we've got cities like New York, I don't know, maybe New York, but places like that where there's large numbers of immigrants already in the city or county, where they just have to now put them out on the streets, right? So are they included in this mix? Are they put on the run? Or are they still getting preferential treatment and being housed first before the American that's been waiting for a long time for that type of support, help?
For under-city highways could mean up to $750 in fines or 15 days in prison for...
So where they would normally have congregated under city bridges, blah, 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 that is now all become illegal.
Multiple offenses.
And they're going to charge them $750 so that, you know, it becomes a ching-ching system within the justice system where eventually some of these people are just going to be locked up in jail, as many of them will be targeted and will die for whatever reason, whether they're hot-capped in terms of a hot shot, murdered by fentanyl, and then the cops cover it up, and then their bodies are whisked off for illegal organ harvesting, or they simply freaking disappear, which happens quite often. And you get my point, right?
We listed the 8 states with the highest homelessness rates.
They become very vulnerable for the underbelly on the dark side of the dark web, of the black market, of illegal activity that is being facilitated by our politicians, parliament buildings, and public union sector as a secondary income to be able to sustain themselves within that middle class, upper middle class lifestyle.
These states are increasingly implementing criminal penalties for acts such as public sleeping, camping, and asking for charity among homeless individuals. 1. California. California has passed a new...
Don't forget, I don't know when they passed this. I'm not quite sure when those 1,000 people, 800 people, it was a lot of people that just up and disappeared in the middle of the night with nobody noticing it, so that some Chinese representative could come and look around, and I don't know what they were planning, people, but they were definitely planning something now, weren't they? Right? But where did all those people go? How can the government prove to us, the public, that each and every one got safely relocated when they can't even deal with the problem to begin with? And now, because they can't deal with the problem to begin with, now they're upping the criminalization of them as they're catering to the immigrants.
Law that prohibits people from sitting, lying, sleeping, or storing personal property on public property. The law, which goes into effect on January 1st, 2024, applies to all cities and counties.
Okay, you see what you see here now? When this shit started in British Columbia, Canada, and people started getting evicted from their basement suites and from their houses to accommodate a growing immigration population, a legal one at that, so that homeowners, right, the overlords, could increase the rents because they knew that the immigrants were coming in with the federal, provincial, municipal subsidies in combination with, support from the food bank, support from here, support from there, so that those people could absorb the rental increase because they had enough income coming in from all those different areas of subsidies, welfare, basically, welfare people, right? If they weren't being sponsored, okay? Because you have to remember, we got a lot of rich immigrants out here that bring over others and will sponsor them as well, but that's not to say that the ones being sponsored still can't tap in to all the services being provided for by the federal, provincial, and municipal, whereas someone like me or my son or whoever, we don't qualify because we're not the preferred citizen. In other words, an immigrant can come in with a sponsorship and buy a home because between the sponsorship and the federal government in partnership with the province can afford to buy the home even though they've lived in the province for only maybe, a month to 6 months? And quite possibly could be participating in illegal activity while the government covers it up? Yeah, okay.
In the state. There are a few exceptions to the law. People are allowed to sit, lie, or sleep on public property if they are participating in a permitted protest or demonstration, waiting for public transportation,
in a permitted protest,
using a public restroom, receiving medical...
How often can you find a public restroom in these kind of situations, people? Seriously. If it was that easy to find a public restroom, these cities wouldn't have a problem with feces all over the streets and urine and everything else. Right? Forked tongue.
Medical treatment. The law also allows cities and counties to designate certain areas as safe zones, where people are allowed to...
Yeah, but the only safe zones that are being designated basically are these immigrant camps that they're building all across the United States of America to house illegal immigrants that are coming from every country under the sun. Right? Well, our news medias and politicians basically only focus on the petty criminals to distract away from the hardcore criminals that commit white-collar crime in regards to the laundering of money via through the sales of body parts, to which a lot of those body parts come from the American people that are forced to be in this situation through that manufactured poverty. But the numbers are getting so high now that our governments have to cover up their asses and bring in their subsidized rental for the middle class so they don't end up out there with the other middle class, not to mention the poorest of the poor, because it's not all poor people out on the streets in the United States of America. A lot of these people are living in their RVs, were middle class, but were decimated. A million lives were ruined because of what our governments are doing, while YouTube taking down my videos, because I talk about this stuff. Don't tell me a million lives weren't fucking ruined when you can see it for yourself. And now they don't, rather than deal with the problem, make amends, make a wrong right, give restitution, right, help people to get back on their feet. They just want to criminalize them more as they cater to illegal immigrants. And if it's not illegal, well, just come to Canada and they'll cater to the legal immigrants. But it doesn't matter. It's all the same. One big pile of corruption.
To sleep. However, these safe zones must be at least 1,000 feet away from schools, daycare centers, parks, and libraries. The anti-homeless law had... To which, oftentimes when poor people, or any people, are homeless, it's beyond being poor anymore. Obviously, the poor were the first ones in line to be assassinated and taken out and thrown out, right? But now we've got the middle class out there. Hell, somewhere in California, I think it's California, they have a highway with vehicle after vehicle after vehicle. You're talking thousands of vehicles sitting on the highway with a whole bunch of homeless people with nowhere to go, living in their trucks, their RVs, their cars, whatever it is. Okay? Obviously, they came from houses at one point or another. They came from functional apartment buildings that were affordable. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had a freaking car, never mind an RV. You had to be in a house in order to be able to even have an RV or a camper or anything like that. Well, now they're just up sitting on some freaking highway waiting for energy weapons. Yeah. They better paint their freaking roofs blue to protect themselves. Seriously. And that's assuming that the news media would even report on it. Okay? Has been met with mixed reactions. Some people believe that it is necessary to crack down on homelessness, while others are...
Okay, so that's why they're now throwing immigrants out onto the streets, because city budgets can't handle the overflow. Yeah. Well, they work on housing them because it's humane, as they're putting more restrictions on the Americans. Well, we do that out here too, only we're not so blatant about it. We do it nicely, as Dr. God, Dr. Death, whatever she is to you, a.k.a. Dr. Bonnie Henry, who represents 5.6 million people in the province of British Columbia, Canada, but doesn't have not one legitimate patient behind her title of being a quote-unquote doctor. Just be kind. If you're going to do dirty deeds, right, just do it in a kind way so that it's not exposed, right? That's how we operate in British Columbia, Canada, as a template for every other province and territory to follow our lead, being that we're the first ones to come in with subsidized middle-class housing that starts off as a rental. But they're going to build in where that qualifying middle-class family, who more than likely will be an immigrant family, so that they can tap in with federal subsidies and other subsidies in order to get the down payment to buy the rental that they're renting off of the province or whoever. So they can consider themselves to be middle class in a stack and pack building that Trudeau wants to make it into a 4-bedroom, 3-bedroom, quote unquote, apartment with no trees. Don't forget, they're cutting down all the trees, and the ones that they're cutting down, if they, they have to replace it with something, so it's all ornamental, nothing with no real municipal, medical, like for example, pine trees. Their pine needles have a high concentration of vitamin C. Cut down all the pine trees. You can't make pine tree tea to supplement lack of vitamin C if something should happen later on in life and all the orange trees die off in Florida. I'm using that as an example. Right? Weeping willows have medical properties in them that can help with wounds and shit like that, as well as you can use that to help plant shoots to germinate quicker, right? Cut down all the walnut trees so that the general population in British Columbia, Canada, can't go out to the walnut grove, never mind a single tree, and gather up walnuts for themselves. They have to go to the quote-unquote grocery store and get them coming in from China after they've been irradiated or wherever they're shipped in from. I'm just saying. But keep in mind, they are irradiated.
Argue that it is cruel and inhumane. The law has also been challenged.
That's what they're trying to say about the immigrant population right now. Oh, God forbid, you can't kick them out, blah, blah, blah. That's inhumane. Well, welcome to the new Congo, a.k.a. the United States of America and Canada. Nothing new under the sun here. Join the club. Stand in line like the rest of us. Take your turn. Better yet, why don't you go back to your own country and fix your own problems? If the governments are so concerned about these people, why don't they find a way to help with those governments from those other countries to help fix those problems in those other countries so those people can stay in their own countries and have a prosperous, peaceful life in their own countries versus coming here 10,000 at a pop, taking up all the housing so our government can come in 5-10 years later with some scheme that builds in a permanent underclass, basically of renters, manufactured poverty, but wants to label them as middle class because they're overinflated in the rent, right? As they stuff them into apartments that technically should be made for lower class income people and the poor. So we've been effectively wiped out. I don't have a middle class income in order to be able to afford anything that the federal, Trudeau, or freaking David Eby, NDP, British Columbia, Canada, fucking parliament buildings has to offer. Nothing. I'm poor. My annual income is $16,000 a year. I get a little bit of federal child tax credit for Amari, who's completely disabled. And some sort of a contract thing that I got with the province only because they didn't want it to take it to court, so they got called out for what they did to my family as I take it to court, and I want them to acknowledge what they did to my family, and they're still covering it up as they're plotting and scheming to create more families like mine locked into these so-called middle-class rentals with their plastic pipes, people, with their metal little clamps that go bing. And then all of a sudden the pipe goes because it's full of fucking pressure with water and it's spraying and you're sitting up in your freaking apartment thinking you're a middle class person as you're being flooded out. And then along comes the contractors, the UN soldiers busting up the fucking walls trying to find out where it's leaking from. But after the damage is done, who cares? Seriously, they'll just kick your ass out as a middle-class person repair everything and then say, well, we had to spend this amount of money to repair our leaky pipes that are plastic that sprung a leak and destroyed 15 suites because we couldn't locate where the leak was. But now that we repaired everything, even though we've got freaking mold in the walls, but that's okay. Just put on some frickin' fresh drywall. Nobody will notice it. And we're going to jack the rent by another $1,500 for the next tenant that moves in as we convince them that we'll help them to pay for it in terms of becoming the owner of it under some scheme that the next government brought in partnership with the federal government. Because that's where it's leading to. Because this video over here, I guess Trudeau is matching the province of British Columbia, Canada with this program. Well, we've got the real deal going on.
In court, and it is unclear whether it will be upheld. The California Homeless Bill of Rights, which was passed in 2016, prohibits cities and counties from criminalizing homelessness. However, the new anti-homeless law appears to conflict with the Homeless Bill of Rights. It is possible that the courts will strike down the new law as unconstitutional. 2. Florida. Florida has a long history of anti-homeless laws.
Well, that's because Florida is a hub for rich people to go and invest their money into, including a lot of Canadians. So there are no surprises there. They want to keep it as a tourist freaking destination where wealthy investors want to buy homes and have them as little getaways, you know, when they want to get away from Canada and go have a holiday. I'm just saying, right? So I'm not surprised with this.
In recent years, these laws have become increasingly harsh, making it more difficult for people experiencing homelessness to survive. One of the most common anti-homeless laws in Florida is the camping ban. This law prohibits people from sleeping in public places, including parks, sidewalks, and under bridges. The law also prohibits people from storing their belongings in public places. Another common anti-homeless law is the panhandling ban. This law prohibits people from asking for money in public places. The law is often used to target homeless people, even though it is also used to target other people.
And this is where they get lured to their death. Don't tell me it's not happening, because it is. They literally get lured to their death. They get matched in terms of blood type, da-dee-dee-da. See who cares about them. The less who care about them, the easier it is to snatch them up.
Such as tourists. 3. Texas. One of the most controversial anti-homeless laws in Texas is House Bill 1925.
Well, I don't know. Texas is on fire. The only houses that are surviving are the ones with the blue roofs, kind of like in Maui, in Hawaii. Apparently, Biden spilled the beans. Yep, the ones with the blue roofs were the ones that didn't burn up. Isn't that interesting? But a whole lot of land, cows, I think 150,000, something like that, and whole towns got wiped out. Yeah, isn't that interesting? Why, people? Because Texas was fighting to keep the ranchers. Yep, they wanted to keep the cows. But they had to make sure that that wasn't going to happen because they're bringing in their fake meat. Everybody knows that. So now meat prices in terms of cows and anything else, chickens and pigs and goats and freaking ducks, because it wasn't just the cows that went poof. It was all of that, right? Not including the farmland, all of it. Grazing pastures, all wiped out. Don't have the exact numbers on it, but we're talking a lot of destruction here. Okay? I think those fires are still going. Yeah.
Which was signed into law by Governor Greg Abbott in 2021. The law makes it a Class C misdemeanor, punishable by a fine of up to $500, to camp in an unapproved public place. The law also bans cities from using public parks as sanctioned homeless campsites. Proponents of the law say it is necessary to protect public health and safety. They argue that homeless encampments
It's necessary to protect public health and safety, but bring in any person from anywhere under the sun over the border and let them just run free anywhere they want in the country of the United States of America, and just, take your chances. Take your chances in terms of, pathogens. Right? Same thing in Canada. Like they got some sort of foot and mouth thing going on with the kids in schools. Right? Tisha took Mari to the hospital a while back, right? Because, his little foot there or whatever. And the first thing that they said was, we've got all these kids in here with this virus. Thank God he didn't get it, as far as I could tell. But yeah, it's like an infestation. Yeah. Where did it come from?
can be magnets for crime and can pose a health hazard. Opponents of the law say it is cruel and inhumane to criminalize people for simply trying to find a place to sleep. They also argue that the law does nothing to address the underlying causes of homelessness, such as poverty, mental illness, and addiction.
Okay, but he's not addressing the middle class that live in their RVs, in their cars, so on and so on and so on. Okay? He just put it by default. It's a poverty, it's poor people's problem. No, it's beyond that. Okay? That was created by our governments when landlords discovered that they could throw them out onto the streets. Who cares if they got injected by somebody that was a handler and injected them with drugs once they got out there and got them hooked for life to the needle as they were putting poison inside the syringe, basically, to turn them into zombies until their numbers were called. So that the landlords could take whatever it was that they kicked these people out of, increase the rent by 3,000%, and rent it out to immigrants that were being subsidized by our governments, more than one, basically. Or move in the UN soldiers and stack and pack them 8 to 12 in a 2-bedroom fucking suite so they can go out into the community and start tearing down house after house after house after house after house. So the next crew can come in with plastic pipes and little metal clips and build quality housing. Yeah, okay.
In addition to House Bill 1925,
So those buildings can sit empty.
Texas has a number of other anti-homeless
I'm thinking maybe that's why the government's bringing in this middle-class subsidized freaking scheme that they're bringing in, because a lot of these stack and pack buildings that they're building out here, they can't find nobody that can afford to rent them. So if they're coming in with subsidies, which wouldn't be unusual because that's what they're doing, just throw on another subsidy and bring them up so that their income kind of gets to that threshold of being a middle class so that they qualify to live there, because the government is paying this, the federal government is paying that, the municipal government is paying that, and then they got this. Of course they can afford it. Yeah.
laws on the books. These laws make it illegal to solicit money in public, sleep in a vehicle, store personal belongings in public, wash clothes in public.
But not the immigrants that they got coming in. Hell no. They get processed the minute they show up at the door. Hell, they get to stay in quality hotels and have their meals delivered. They even get maid service, some of these individuals. Uh-huh. Isn't that interesting? And now it's being told that they're getting like $20,000 per month debit cards. It was bad enough that they were getting $2,000 a month per month debit cards. But now, and housing. And their meals paid for. Right? But now, some of these politicians are handing over $20,000 a month.
Build a fire in public. 2024. Washington. Homelessness is a growing problem in Washington state. Homelessness number has been steadily increasing in recent years, and it is projected to continue to grow. One of the challenges facing people experiencing homelessness is the criminalization of their situation. Many cities and towns in Washington have passed laws that make it illegal to do things like sit or lie on public sidewalks, sleep in public places, or panhandle. These laws are often referred to as anti-homeless laws. In 2022, the state of Washington passed a new law that aimed to address the criminalization of homelessness. The law, known as the Right-of-Way Safety Initiative.
But that's not going to apply to immigrants, legal or otherwise. Hell no. As a matter of fact, you got these illegal immigrants storming city council demanding housing. Yeah. Because, they're just cutting back on some of the funding, right? And I guess some of these people are ending up out on the streets. But are they being treated as the same as these people? We haven't heard about that yet. No, because the rush is to house them.
Prohibits cities from enforcing anti-homeless laws in areas around highways.
And these cities now, I was listening to it last night when I was laying on the couch, people. I can go into my history and pull up that video where they had a city council listening to the people in the neighborhood with their 1 minute allotment after they wasted a whole bunch of time just with a bunch of yoki doki, right? Stating their opinion on whether they wanted, I don't know how many people they could house. Start off with 500 people. Start off with 500 people with the projection of being able to house 2,000 people on a piece of property that is considered to be private. And because it was considered to be private, the city didn't really have a say as to whether it could be there or not outside of through zoning and coding and, is the property safe in terms of it's not a chemical landfill, that kind of crap. But outside of that, they'd already started to do excavations and all this other crap, and people noticed that they were starting to excavate and get ready to build before it even got passed in City Hall. How many times have we heard about crap like that go on in our own local areas? Too many times to count. Anyway, they're going to be building a facility. It's prefabricated. They're building in a facility on private property because the owner wants to be generous, in partnership with the city, through proper zoning and coding and all this other crap, to initially house 500 migrants, right? With
the law also,
with the projection to have the capacity to house 2,000 on this one particular property. Well, many people in the neighborhood are saying no, to which quite a few of them couldn't even speak English. Whether they were speaking Chinese or whether they were speaking Spanish, the interpreter would come in and say, oh, no, this person is going on about how she won't feel safe, living there with all these people running around that she doesn't know. And even though she's an immigrant, she doesn't agree with the process and she doesn't want that facility to be built. Well, you get other people coming in saying, oh, well, you got to be kind. You got to put yourself in their shoes. And, and we are the ones who created this problem. And it's our responsibility to build what we need to build in order to look after them. Because that's the American thing to do. Like, come on, people. But that's for immigrants. That's not for who we are looking at here. In terms of the American people. They can't sleep in their cars. They can't sleep in their RVs. They can't sleep in their freaking campers. They can't keep their belongings beside them on the street. Never mind leave them so that they can go scrounge around for a sandwich. Right? They don't have access to public washrooms because local businesses refuse them to go inside and use their washrooms. Very few cities provide porta potties or those portable, outhouses. Right? So they end up having to defecate and urinate right out in city streets. And because they're so demoralized, so broken, their brains are so fractured. Honestly, they don't even realize what they're doing anymore. But they are the perfect candidate to target, right? To map out with their blood, blah, 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 and for them to suddenly die for whatever reason or suddenly disappear for whatever reason without a word as to what happened in the great grand scheme when it comes to laundering money via through the sale of body parts. Because you know it's happening. The immigrant, whether legal or illegal, is just the smokescreen to cover up that fact in Canada and in the United States of America.
It requires cities to provide shelter or housing to people living in encampments in these areas.
They don't have housing and encampments for these people. They're too busy taking in the immigrants. Whether legally or illegally, 10,000 Syrians at one time in 1 month came to the province of British Columbia, Canada, and moved into my district. And now I can't move out because from that point forward in 2016, it's been an ongoing progression where it's just immigrant after immigrant after immigrant after immigrant. If it's not the fucking UN soldiers taking up the housing, 8 to 12 at one time, doesn't matter. They're the UN soldiers that get put to work to tear down house after house after house. So the middle class is now facing what I and my family's been facing and people like me have been facing for a long fucking time. But before that blows up into the provincial Parliament building's face, they're going to build in their scheme to shuffle them around, to just build the next level of manufactured poverty, because sooner or later they're not going to be able to afford whatever it was that they fucking moved into, and they're going to be forced out of that housing because they won't be able to afford to buy anything else anywhere else because the cycle will just repeat itself. Only thing is that there won't be no white people left in Canada. There won't be too many black people, just a few servants running around, and the one or two fucking doctor just because, to make it look like they're diverse, okay? I'm just saying. It's not because they respect them, it's just to make it look like they're diverse and they're nice and kind, when in fact there's nothing kind about them. In terms of the people who facilitate this crap, the overlords, in partnership with corrupt politicians.
The Right-of-Way Safety Initiative is a step in the right direction, but it is not a complete solution. More needs to be done to address the root causes of homelessness, such as poverty, lack of affordable housing, and mental illness. 5. Massachusetts. Massachusetts has a long history of anti-homeless laws. These laws make it illegal for people to sleep, sit, or loiter in public places, and they have been used to criminalize homelessness and make it more difficult for people to get back on their feet. One of the most common anti-homeless laws in Massachusetts is the law against sleeping in public. This law makes it illegal to sleep in any place that is not a designated shelter, even if it is cold or wet outside. This law has been used to arrest people for sleeping in parks, under bridges, and even in their own cars. Another common anti-homeless law is the law against loitering. This law makes it illegal to stand or sit in one place for too long, even if you are not doing anything wrong. This law has been used to arrest people for simply sitting on a bench or waiting for a bus. In recent years, there have been efforts to reform anti-homeless laws in Massachusetts. In 2022, the Massachusetts Attorney General issued an opinion that the law against sleeping in public is unconstitutional if there are not enough shelter beds available. This opinion has been a major victory for advocates for the homeless, but it is only a first step.
Well, you see, there are not enough shelter beds for the homeless because they're building shelter beds for the immigrants. 500 to 2,000 deep. Yeah.
Six. Pennsylvania. At least 50 Pennsylvania municipalities.
They are the preferred citizen now. You got to have those numbers of immigrants in order to mask over what's happening to the American-born people in terms of having their body parts harvested illegally namely, without people taking notice as to what's happening, but looking around and realizing that it's just getting browner, browner, and browner when it comes to the color of people's skin, where they become the majority with their hand out. As the crooks in the neighborhood, on all levels, capitalize off the situation, depending on where they are on that grid of being a criminal.
Municipalities have laws that prohibit sleeping or camping in public places. These laws are known as anti-homeless laws, and they have been criticized by advocates for the homeless as being unconstitutional and ineffective. The Department of Justice, DOJ, has also weighed in on the issue of anti-homeless laws. In 2016, the DOJ filed a statement of interest in a lawsuit against the city of Boise, Idaho, which had an anti-camping ordinance. The DOJ argued that the ordinance was unconstitutional because it criminalized homelessness itself, rather than any specific behavior.
Government will fuck with me, I'll be a 65-year-old hoe. A renegade one at that. The hoe stroll. Before I'd allow them me into a fucking zombie with their poisonous drugs, or go begging some goofball to house me, knowing what I know, in terms of, yeah, you're gonna lure me to my death? I don't think so. Get the fuck away from me, motherfucker. I'll look after myself. Yeah, blind as a bat, with my high heels on. I'm just saying. Right? You gotta be a rebel. You can't be afraid to face the future. Where these people, they settled to take the muddy water. They settled to drink the muddy water. They settled to wallow in the muddy water. And now they're all just half dead, sitting ducks in the muddy water. It ain't happening for me. No, 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 no. Call me crazy, I don't care. I got backbone.
The DOJ's statement of interest was a major victory for homeless advocates, and it has since been cited in other lawsuits challenging anti-homeless laws. However, the issue is still far from settled.
I'll be like a fox. I'll find... You don't want me on the streets? No prob. I'll go find myself a little bit of bush with a few little trees. I'll dig myself out a little burrow, you know, like a little den in the ground where you don't notice it and you won't know that I'm sleeping in there. Being that you treat me like a rabid animal, I might as well live like one in a burrow, in a den. And when you come and you stick your hand in there, I'll chop it off with my machete. And you'll be like, damn, what's inside that hole? Right? I should be a storyteller. I wonder if anyone ever wrote something like that before. I wonder if that's you know how they say nothing new under the sun. I wonder if anyone ever wrote a story like that where that's even like, right? That just kind of came out of my head, right? But yeah, you don't want it, you don't want me sleeping here, sleeping there, right? Well, fuck, I'll dig a hole and I'll burrow myself in there. I'll make it nice and cozy. Yeah. You won't even know it. You won't even know I'm there.
Some cities have repealed their anti-homeless laws, while others have continued to enforce them. The debate over anti-homeless law...
And then along comes the city with, dog catcher, those poles with the rope on them to catch dogs. Be sticking that thing into the hole trying to snag onto me. Yeah.
Is complex. On the one hand, it is understandable that cities want to keep their streets clean and safe. On the other hand, anti-homeless laws can make it even harder for people to get back on their feet. When people are forced to sleep on the streets, They are more likely to be exposed to the elements, crime, and violence. They are also more likely to have health problems. There are better ways to address the issue of homelessness than by criminalizing it. Cities should invest in more affordable housing, mental health services, and drug treatment programs. They should also work to create more welcoming environments for people experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, well, they are.
7.
You see, that's the thing. They're doing that for the immigrants. Because the legal immigrants are the smokescreen. Right? They're the ones that are masking over what's going on in the black market, the underground economy. They have to have the surplus so people don't notice what's happening in front of them as they criminalize and victimize the victims to it as they fall to drinking that muddy water. Yeah.
Arizona. Arizona has a number of laws that criminalize homelessness, making it difficult for people to get the help they need. These laws include a ban on sleeping in public places, even if there is no available shelter space. A ban on camping on public land.
Wouldn't you consider that to be cruel? You can't sleep anywhere, even if there's no shelter space. So, but you can go to some private property, but then that opens you up to being lured to your death because it's private. We know how that works.
And even if it is vacant. A ban on panhandling. A ban on...
Sierra was lured to private property. Yeah. She had no place to go. But they made sure she had a place to go that was private. Why did it have to be private? Right? We seen the shenanigans. Right? I just did a video on that. Illegal organ harvesting. Not in your backyard.
Storing belongings in public places. These laws have been criticized by advocates for the homeless, who say they do nothing to address the root causes of homelessness and instead punish people who are already struggling.
Well, what are they going to do when my 70-year-old neighbor gets kicked out of her house so that the property owner of 7 houses can come in and tear everything down to make affordable middle-class condos in the form of a stack and pack prefab apartment so that they can be subsidized to live in them? The middle class, that is. For life. Unless, of course, they're one of the lucky ones that can qualify to buy whatever it is that they're renting through some program that the province just brought in 2014 under their new budget. That's what I'm saying. I need to write this stuff down on paper, black and white, so that we can walk through it step by step by step. Something like the timeline when Shimei was murdered and the cops covered it up.
They also say that these laws disproportionately impact people of color and people with disabilities. In 2019, a federal judge ruled that Phoenix's ban on urban camping was unconstitutional because it violated the Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. The judge found that the law forced people to sleep in dangerous and unhealthy conditions, and that it did not provide them with adequate alternative shelter options.
So if this is the case, why aren't they, the American people in this situation, being dealt with first before any immigrant comes into the country? Never mind hundreds of thousands, millions illegally.
Despite this ruling, many cities in Arizona continue to enforce anti-homeless laws. In 2023, the Arizona legislature passed a bill that would have further criminalized homelessness by requiring cities to remove homeless encampments and charge people with trespassing. However, the bill was vetoed by Governor Doug Ducey. 8.
And honestly, even if a private property owner allowed these people to come in and move in because they had no place to go, we know what happens with that, people. It's not long before the city shows up and starts penalizing the property owner. Okay? And putting pressure on the property owner to evict them all out onto the streets. right? Happens all the time.
Ohio. Homelessness is a complex problem with no easy solutions. However, some cities and towns in Ohio have responded to homelessness by enacting laws that criminalize the act of being homeless. These laws make it illegal to sleep, panhandle, or even ask for help in public. These anti-homeless laws are often...
So, my next question is, we're almost at the end of this video, and I'm going to put this as part 1, because there's 2 other videos that I want to go through. This one I just happened to come across, and I thought maybe it might be just good to touch base on it, right? My question is, these 8 states, whatever is being reported on here in February, I think it was, September of 2023. Now, whether those, laws or whatever you want to call them, have been rescinded or not remains to be seen. But are they applying this as well to the immigrants? I don't think so. I think we've got a 2-tier system here blaring in our faces. Okay?
often ineffective and counterproductive. They do not address the root causes of homelessness, such as poverty, lack of affordable housing, and mental illness. Instead, they simply push homeless people out of sight and out of mind. In some cases, these laws have even led to tragic consequences. In 2018, a homeless man named Chris Davis was arrested for sleeping in a public park in Columbus, Ohio.
See, this is where you have to burrow and make yourself a den. And cover it over with some rocks and brush and something where it kind of gives you, makes you kind of blend in like a chameleon. Right?
He died in jail the next day from a heart attack. The ACLU of Ohio...
So they say. I take it with a grain of salt. Anybody can falsify a medical record.
...has challenged several anti-homeless laws in the...
He was probably targeted through his blood type, booked in, got all the ducks in order, and then it was time to harvest him. Yep. But not in the United States of America, in their backyard. Hell no. You gotta go to Mexico. You gotta go to Cambodia. You gotta go up to the Darien Gap. You gotta go someplace else, somewhere else, in order to get an organ, right? You can't just put your order out in with the network and get it, even though the guy just up and died all of a sudden. Yeah. I take it with a grain of salt, people.
State. In one case, the ACLU successfully argued that a law banning people from sleeping in public parks...
They're not going to be harvesting immigrants' organs because it would be an uproar within the immigrant community so fast it would make people's heads spin. But if Americans go missing, who gives a shit? Just kind of like what's going on in Canada. Who gives a shit if Shimei was murdered? Who gives a shit if Uncle John was medically kidnapped? Who gives a shit if Sierra was lured to her death? Who gives a shit? They were Canadian, right? Because the government sure doesn't give a shit.
...parks was unconstitutional. The court ruled that the law violated the First Amendment right to free speech, as well as the Eighth Amendment prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment. Here are some of the specific anti-homeless laws in Ohio. Camping ban. This law makes it illegal to sleep in a public place, including parks, sidewalks, and doorways. Panhandling ban. This law makes it illegal to ask for money in public. Loitering ban. This law makes it illegal to loiter in a public place for no apparent reason. Solicitation ban. This law makes it illegal to solicit food or shelter in public. These laws are often vague and open to interpretation, which can lead to homeless people being arrested for simply trying to survive. They also make it difficult for homeless people to access the resources they need, such as food, water, and shelter.
There you go.